mixed use, CA, AI, and we have a guest. Let's get started. Welcome to What the RFI. I'm Matt Brennan, and this is the podcast all about CA from a architectural and a project coordinator's perspective. So today, I share the stage with a special guest, David Longpre. So David, say hi, and let's talk a little bit about you.
Hi, thanks, Matt. It's nice to be on the show. What I don't know where to start really, other than I run my own firm, Longpre Architecture, here in Vancouver, BC. We started in 2022, so still a relatively young firm. Matt and I met at Buildex, I believe, in last year, randomly eating lunch together.
Yeah,
There was no seats available.
yeah.
It's one of those random encounters at Buildex.
And it was very special because it was Valentine's Day.
Was it? Can't
It
even
was,
remember. That's
but no,
hilarious.
I loved it. It was a lot of fun. No, and that's the thing with all these conferences that you go to and you meet friends and yeah, just engaging. And I really did value our conversation that day. I really enjoyed it. I can't remember the exact details, but it was just it was a nice lunch. So yeah, thanks for joining me
Yeah,
on my special day.
no worries.
We gotta.
Uh, yeah, it was interesting because because I just had started the firm not that long ago, so it was interesting talking to someone who's experienced as yourself, being in the industry as long as you were, and then just having a really dynamic, open conversation. And then you
Yeah,
trying to sell me on something after.
exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. I was in my new transition. It was we were both
Yeah,
transitioning at the same time
yeah,
because I just made my big move to part three and going from the other side of the fence and trying to work that, but at the same time just trying to be who I was when in the industry in that respect and too because that's the one thing with all these conferences. Going to the conference, I get my AIBC credits like that. I actually put
mm,
my numbers in, and I think I checked from some of the stuff that's been auto, but I've got a whole bunch of stuff I got a manual input, and I
yeah,
think I'm almost done my credits. I just need 2 indigenous classes, and then
yeah.
we're good to go.
Yeah, I just got audited for my credits. I got one of the random audits
Oh,
just quite
oh,
recently, but it's not hard getting your credits if you just go to these events, like, and actually take the courses you're interested in. But
yeah,
oddly enough, I don't find the Buildex ones very good. It's very boring. The architecture ones are always boring. I don't know why architects have to always be so boring all the time, but I love the interior design show better.
yeah.
Those conferences seem to be a little bit more dynamic. Their interior designers seem to think about the world a little differently
Hmm.
um, than us. And I really appreciated there was a really great designer from Ginsler out of New York, and how she was dealing with experiential architecture, and stuff, which is all kind of like a kind of like science world where like you have exhibits, but like she's doing it for the ultra rich, and it's
Yeah,
just fascinating to see the way they see design so much differently than so many of my colleagues. I really appreciate the interior design ones way more. I find they're a lot more fun.
that's cool. Well, attention to the detail too, right? And it's just like I used to work for Chill Interiors, right? Coordinator,
Mm,
that did all the hotels and everything, and my goodness, I was always and still today, I follow, Adele and Paul and on, LinkedIn and all that, and they see the awards they get and just because it was every attention to detail, right? And
yeah,
that's something that level. But at the same time, they have a client that goes, spend money, just spend
the
the money to
dream.
make it good. So that's what makes it a different game changer.
Yeah, it's hard. Obviously, it's hard when you start out on your own firm so young, because like you basically have to restart your career over on smaller projects again, kind of like
Yeah.
what you did when you're an intern, and then work your
Hmm.
way up while you're building the firm. But we always dream of those unlimited budgets, so I hear about it.
Yeah.
And I'm in the right city for it, but
Yeah.
it's I'm still waiting for that client. Once it gives me the whole purse to go spend.
Didn't do it. Oh, it'll come. It'll come. It's well, connections, network, and all that.
Yeah.
Well, right now with your firm, like, what are you guys focusing on today?
We can see Mike in the background there working on one of our multiplex projects. Um, If your listeners don't know, across North America, all the cities are kind of having a housing crisis. It's
Hmm.
not really big news, but the way our government is really responding to it is densification, which I think is a good thing. I forget the acronym fully, but it's SMOO or something. I can't remember what the full acronym of the BC government implemented, but it got rid of all the single family zoning, essentially allowing multiplex, which is
Right.
duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, or 6 units on one single family lot. So I had a lot of experience with that at my former employer, Formworks. We did a lot of character house and heritage conversions, and that was kind of like the precursor to multiplex in Vancouver. So that was saving the existing character house and then getting 6 units out
Hmm.
of the site. It was a retention program to make sure that heritage is kept. But unfortunately, with the new multiplex rules, it's kind of now allowed all these heritage homes to be torn down. So
Right.
I still think there needs to be some revisiting the bylaws to protect our heritage, but
Yeah.
um, it is what it is right now. But I had a lot of experience doing that, and that's kind of what really led me down opening up this firm, because I knew multiplex was going to be a huge thing. I knew densification had to happen.
Yeah.
Um, I always kind of say Vancouver is like a mini or a young Tokyo. It's bordered by the mountains. It's bordered by the ocean.
Yeah.
Such a young country. We're such a young country, but the densification, there's nowhere else to go anymore. So the only way to do it is to densify and get more um, buildings. And a lot of people will be shocked that when they take the image of Tokyo, it's the entire population of Canada in one city,
Yeah.
and that isn't achieved by skyscrapers. It's achieved by medium density, 3 to 4 story townhouses everywhere. And
Right.
if you want to fit a lot more people in a small space, I think that's really what it needs to go. And that's why you keep hearing the conversations about the missing middle a
Hmm.
lot more. Because it is the middle, a Howard to house everybody.
Right. And do you find like with like, well, being downtown Vancouver, like again, well, we see that naturally, like there's a couple single family dwelling lots, they get, consolidated into a single one. And then from there, they just build up.
Hmm.
And just to basically, like you said, to densify, because we're not an urban, we can't sprawl out where we've kind of reached our
Yeah.
somewhat max, point, we're not like Houston, Texas, where they just keep going out, or like Regina or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's, you can't keep going out. You're limited to what your footprints are. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
it's interesting coming because I did my master's degree in Calgary, and I came up in Calgary learning architecture. So that city, if you take the same footprint of Calgary and you overlay it over, it's the same, almost the same size as Tokyo.
You're right.
I could be wrong, but like it's very so
Yeah.
like
Good point.
the footprint of Calgary is ginormous if you actually look at it. Um,
Right.
and yet it still has a population of like I think I don't know, it's like 1.3 million or something, just crazy.
That is
So
crazy. Yeah.
Canadians were really spoiled with space, but somehow we still have a housing crisis. So
Yeah.
it's kind of catch 22, especially in Vancouver. I get it, but I don't get it in other parts of the country. So it is interesting to think about.
Exactly. And I want to come back to that point when we talk about standardized plans, but
Hmm.
I guess too, like you guys being in the heart of downtown, I guess one exciting project you are working on is your own brand new office
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well. How's it
yeah.
coming along?
Good. It's with Collab Management. Give them a shout out, but they're building it right now. It was the seems like the universe is kind of aligned in the best way. Right now we're in an office share kind of tower with Regis, just renting a single office, but it's too small as you can see. But it doesn't feel kind of real yet. But I know that office actually having a real space that's yours with your logo on the wall.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for that moment to walk in and see it. And it's very Japanese inspired. In the front, a lot of my training and
Hmm.
stuff is inspired by Japan. I've lived there, I've worked there. So you can, a lot of the influence, I can't, it's part of me now, so I can't let it go. So the beginning of the office will have the Japanese kind of aesthetic. And it opens up into more of a English manor type style with Persian rugs
Nice.
and antiques. Um, so
Very
I really
cool.
value the history. I really like heritage. So I'm always trying to bring that in somewhere. And it is in a heritage building in Gastown. So
Very
with
cool.
exposed timber,
Yep.
ceilings, all that kind of stuff. There's brick in my office, which I absolutely
Nice.
love.
Ours is just I worked down. It was one of my first jobs. It was in the first job in Vancouver was in downtown. I think it was like 421 right on the street. It was kind of
Mm,
yeah, you almost at the three corners. And anyways, that's so cool that I hear that's coming along
yeah.
and Gastown has totally changed over the years as well.
Yes. As if anyone knows Vancouver, um, downtown East Side is very infamous for a reason.
Mhm.
With all the drug issues and homelessness that is in that area, so there's a lot of crime. And Gastown is unfortunately it's the number one tourist destination in the city.
Yep.
With the cruise ship terminal right there, everyone goes down to Gastown to see the steam clock.
Yep.
Um, but 2 streets over, you have the poorest people in the country. So it's quite the juxtaposition. The city, but it is up and coming. The city's doing a good job. They shut down the Water Street there to be pedestrian only in summer, and
Nice. Right.
that really brought a lot of nice and life into the space. Um, Mayor Ken Sim, he ran on bringing more police and stuff into the area. So it has cleaned up quite a bit. I've noticed a huge
Mhm.
improvement, and it will become an up and coming neighborhood eventually. That's why I kind of sneak in, get a good lease deal now, and then when it comes up, maybe up and coming in the next 5 years, we'll still be there, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. No, very cool. Oh, it's exciting.
Yeah, yeah,
And like one thing too, like you're really humble on LinkedIn about the AI, but when I took a look at, going on the website and just got a refresher, see where you guys were at. And, I like the AI laboratory and you
yeah,
have been playing with AI, which is really exciting.
yeah.
And how are you finding it? How is it changing the way that you do your business day to day?
It's not how you might think. I know everyone in the industry is quite scared.
Hmm.
But I know there's a lot of fear that comes with technology. But my generation, we were pre-internet and after internet. Being
Yeah.
millennials, we knew a time before and after. Same with Xers. Um, but we quickly adapted to that and we used it as a tool of what it's meant for. I do think AI is a tool. It's not here to
Absolutely.
replace people.
Thank
Um,
you. Yeah. Second
it's
that.
especially our profession. It's not going to replace our seal. It's not going to replace liability. No one's gonna trust a computer to spend when they're spending $2 to $3 million on a home or something. They're not going to trust an AI to do it. They're going to want that personal touch.
Yeah.
This is when you're spending that much money. It's always going to be that way. Architecture is the oldest profession in the book, right up there since caves. So,
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
we're not going anywhere. Um,
No, and I agree. Like it is a tool. Like I compare it. Like even think of the days of Revit, right? Like that was a
mhm,
change, right? And when I was at Reno C. Negron Architects downtown, when Revit came into a mix, we went from kind of like 10 users on AutoCAD where we could scale it down to 2. Now
mhm,
it doesn't mean we fired and laid everyone off.
mhm.
We took on more work and we
Yeah.
became more efficient. And I think that's kind of the way AI, how you utilize it as well. Like I use it daily for a few things. Like it does my show notes from this. It
Yeah.
does, if I do a demo recording, it puts, cold notes together. Apple just released their 18.1, which you can get, their AI functionality and playing
Mhm.
with that. And again, it's just a tool to basically do those, tedious tasks I find. And that's what's really slick.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, I I didn't answer your question, but how I used it is similar to you. I use ChatGPT religiously. Um, for me, growing up, communication has always been an issue. A little dyslexic. There's so much going on up in my head that I was never able to translate properly out into English um, properly. And what ChatGPT really gave me the confidence is that because as you know, in our industry, communication needs to be perfect. Um,
yeah,
and if communication's lost, projects can go south very quickly, especially in CA when we get to that. But ChatGPT really helps. I found communicate effectively what I'm trying to get across without bringing my emotions or anything into it. It's always a very clear, direct
yeah.
communication tool, and it's it's works almost the same ways. Me and my husband have been rewatching Mad Men,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
and thank God society has changed as much as it has. But it is interesting to start seeing how, even as an architecture firm back in those days, you would have probably two secretaries underneath you, um,
Yeah.
women often typing up all of our emails, all our memos. That would all be done by hand. But now ChatGPT works like a little secretary,
Yeah.
and I don't, and it doesn't judge you or anything, and it's quite nice.
That's
Uh,
right.
uh, and it is a high stakes profession. It's not always, rosy rainbows and everything. So I
Yeah.
really like ChatGPT. You can write the email that you want to write,
Hmm.
of how angry you are, and then ChatGPT will always make it a professional email. So you don't waste any
Exactly.
time. Uh, you can just vent and get it out, and then ChatGPT will clean it up, and you're not wasting any time. It still gets sent.
There's a good Apple commercial based on like the same thing where it's like this guy is upset because he loses his pudding. Someone takes it from the office fridge, right? And
Mm,
then he types and is very angry and he does it. And then he sends it. And then she comes back and goes, very well written, Dale, or and drops it
yeah,
off. And just, it
yeah.
just, it's a good one to check out.
Yeah. So
Well,
yeah, so in my
oh, go ahead.
business, I've actually just integrated almost into all the communications that leave the office. I've bought in ChatGPT for everybody. So
Nice.
they can process their emails through. It's really helps staff who English is their second language. It just really makes sure that everything is communicated effectively. But it's
Yeah.
also good to bounce ideas off of. And like you said, like doing show notes and stuff, I really do find it a lot. But a lot of people are exploring it in other ways, which is the visualization and stuff,
Right.
which is kind of the next stage of exploring. But I'm still not convinced that AI is here to take over a technologist position, for example, or anything like
No.
that. I can always design something better at this stage.
Exactly. So two I'll give you that I saw, one at AIA Aspire. And speaking of conferences, that's one I think you would like. It's in Asheville
Mm,
every year. Unfortunately, like we went to the conference and then a week later, the Asheville got flooded, right, with North
yeah, yeah,
Carolina and all the hurricanes. But the downtown was secure. It was kind of the surrounding unfortunate. But what a cool conference. I'm pretty sure I'll be there next year in full force. But yeah, you go from place to place. Really neat. But one of the talks was about Finch 3D. And
mm,
this is basically you take a simple open plan and it works really great for multi-res because you'd
yeah,
have your perimeter, you'd have your core, and you can just basically play with a slider. And it's really scary because you're just like, am I being, in this case, it's like, am I being replaced? Are you going to have this someone,
yeah,
someone taking advantage of it? Again, that's where I think if, like you said it yourself, like you can utilize it, manage it, and really play with it. And if it helps you get, to that step further to get those conversations started, but you're still a professional, you're still the
yeah,
architect, you're the
yeah,
creative juices behind it to kind of make the vision and tailor it to what the client actually is telling you, who's the
yeah.
audience. So
But uh I liked the visualization side of things for clients as well.
hmm
Them kind of playing with ideas and sending it to you. It's always a nice kind of starting point for, like, say, for a house or something,
yeah,
because they can play with ChatGPT too. But like you said, even though Finch, just looking at how it runs a room and stuff, it's just using an algorithm, but it takes an architect to visualize themselves walking through the space, and that's why, like, you can't replace the human. Uh,
yeah,
AI is
exactly.
always going to be the interface between our immense amount of data that we have available these days and us. And
Yeah.
I think people just need to remember that there's always going to be a human involved at a certain point
Yeah.
with these tools.
Well, 100%. Because the other one, like I saw, was Blueprint AI. And again, it was more of like a code checker, which again, I'm skeptical about that one because it might work,
Yeah.
maybe it will pick up some dumb stuff like exposure, limited exposure and all that kind of stuff in
Hmm.
your dead end corridors. Maybe it would pick it up, but you don't want to get like used as a crutch and then you're not doing your due. Yeah, it's a fine line where some
Yeah.
of that comes into play. But again, maybe it is useful. Maybe it is picking up and it picks up one thing that you totally oversaw, saw it because you were tired or
Yeah.
anyways. But
The biggest problem I see with AI, and it's already kind of happening, is development companies using this as I can see where it's going to go, where they're going to use this as an excuse not to pay us as much. And
yeah,
that really is kind of the future of this profession, with a lot of architects having to Well, specifically when I started this firm, was like, what value do architects bring? And it's amazing how many people don't know what we even do, or they just see us as a gatekeeper rather than someone who actually helps them
Hmm.
through the project. And I do think that's where the profession really needs to start, changing the image almost immediately. Just because AI is there to write something for you or something, that doesn't mean it takes away from the value you already put into it. And same with the liability that I have to hold. It doesn't matter if the AI does it, I still am legally responsible or financially
Yeah,
responsible for it. So, uh,
exactly.
and I think that will be coming the next kind of decade or so. There'll be a lot of conversations around copyright, all that kind of
Yep.
stuff of dealing with who owns the copyright is already kind of a big question right now.
Yeah,
I know within the
100%.
book industry specifically, because you can
Yeah,
pump out a book very fast as ChatGPT if you really wanted to. Um,
exactly.
but who owns it? Does it OpenAI own it, or do you own it? And it is a
Yeah,
conversation we're gonna have to start having with AI. And I think it'll be a fight, artists versus technology kind of thing, as usual.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's a good thing that, yeah, how it utilizes and it can write it. And yeah, where is it pulling from? Like it
Hmm.
had, like, I did a couple Halloween images, of like construction site and everything. And you can see where, like, it did it fantastic. It literally took 30 seconds, but you can see the kind of where it's starting to piece some of the
Yeah.
images together. And you're right. Like someone worked their heart and soul on that. And now they're not getting paid for that. Right. So it's,
Yeah.
the graphic community is a different world.
Well, unfortunately for them, it's going to be. I think the graphic design industry is going to have a real tough time with AI. I think, unfortunately, like that industry might have to change considerably because Adobe and stuff, they're just gonna they're creating things at such a fast. We're normally we have more time to adapt to technology, but AI is even transforming so much so fast that we can't even keep up. And a lot of
Hmm.
the big benefits being small is I can change immediately. I can change it like that. Like we can experiment with new technology, but a lot of these older firms, with the old guard there, they're still hand drawing. They're
Yeah.
still doing the 2D, and it's even hard to convince them to even go to 3D. So
Yeah.
architects really have to start stepping up and get on board with the technology, but not lose the kind of craft of design at the same time. It's a delicate balance, and that's going to be the future.
Yeah. No, and I agree. So I want to kind of shift back to kind of what you were talking about earlier about, the housing and stuff.
Mhm.
And one thing that, has definitely been a hot topic on LinkedIn, and I've been enjoying each of your posts, is like the Canadian government has released the standardized housing design catalog.
Yeah.
I've taken a look at this, a lot of others, high level thoughts, is it the right way? Is it going to help us build cheaper buildings?
Uh,
Where is it? I have
Easy.
my thoughts.
The easy answer is no. It will
Yeah.
not reduce costs because the designers, consultants aren't really the cost drivers in across Canada. It's the municipal governments and their fees. I've seen ridiculous increases of like 200, like some cities are charging, it's almost like a 20% increase. And the construction cost is just fees. And I think from even if you just look at it from a copyright kind of thing. Most human beings don't want to live in a copy paste box, and
Yeah.
we've already kind of seen that. There's a really famous archetype here in Vancouver called the Vancouver Special. We built them at nauseum in the 70s to deal with the immigration of Chinese and Vietnam refugees. We built them copy paste all through East Vancouver. And when you go through
Hmm.
these neighborhoods, they just don't have any of the charm or the soul of Mount Pleasant or West Vancouver. And it's because we're treating homes like a consumer product, like an iPhone. And I think you can't solve a consumerist problem with more consumerism. And
Hmm.
I really don't think this copy paste thing is going to work. From copyright and like a soul level, it's not good. But even so, every single site's different. In
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
first basis point any architect will tell you if they're good will be the site is first, and the architecture is responding to the site. It's not
Yeah.
vice versa. And this, of course, is very government solution is just we'll just have one kind of home from the catalog across the whole country. But I believe we have 7 climate zones in this country. There's
Mhm.
3,500
Yeah.
municipalities with all their own city bylaws. They all have their own restrictions. They all have their own setbacks, like all this stuff. And how is the federal government supposed to shove this down the throat of every municipal government? Um,
E-
which are
Exact.
creatures of the province anyways. So it goes against the mandate of the federal government here anyway. Uh, it yeah.
Exactly, and that's what I was gonna say, like, the way that the message is coming across is that, like you said, you can buy this plan, drop it in,
Mm,
start construction tomorrow, and it's like, "Hold on,
yeah,
it still needs to go through permitting, it still has to go to the
yeah,
city because, like you said, every site's different, they gotta do their zoning bylaw check, does it
yeah,
even meet? You've got limiting distances issues and all that,
yeah.
like, same thing with, like, here in Chilliwack, BC, I know they've got the 12-minute response time, so
Hmm.
certain areas of Chilliwack your limiting distance gets reduced by half if you're not
Yeah.
sprinklered,
And
right? So now,
yeah, and you're
yeah,
hiring and you have to hire consultants to fix it. So
exactly.
and
It's
for
not going to solve it.
yeah, yeah. So you're gonna pay us anyway.
Yeah,
And it's actually sometimes harder to work with an existing plan than it is just to do one custom for you. And when you're
that's 100%.
yeah, when you're spending $1 to $2 million on a build, like, are you gonna want a cookie cutter plan? Like, no. So you're gonna want a customized house to your family and your soul. Like that's what we believe in LA. Like, yeah, uh, the tagline is like vessels for the soul because like I'm really here to capture you. And a lot of
Yeah,
clients don't even understand what they want. Most people don't even know what they want in a home because they don't have the language. They don't have a lot of the know withal to know what goes in behind the walls, what goes into the plumbing, what goes into the structure. Um, we are trained for years to study people's habits and how they go through a space. Not just that, but a huge thing here is resale. And
hmm,
even though it's
yeah,
their dream home, the client still think about resale. So it
yeah,
then means that it has to be generally appealable to everybody. And uh, it takes a lot of observation and intuition to really know what that is. And you can't replicate intuition as much as the government would want to have.
well,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think like when some of these get started to be constructed, like even if someone went ahead with this and did it, and they went through the city and
Hmm.
whatever, well, let's just pretend that all was worked the way they kind of are pitching it. There's still going to be those changes on site, and there is going to be
Yeah.
that contract administration to some extent. It's not as intensive as anything the other type of jobs that
Yeah.
we do, but it's still going to be involved. And yeah, like I said, how do you tailor it to everyone's? Like I looked at the plans and I went, this wouldn't suit me. Like
Yeah.
where do you put
Yeah.
Christmas?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Well, Christmas
little
band,
things
don't
like
you
that.
know, man?
Yeah, exactly. So maybe a minimalist, the Charlie Brown tree
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
house. I don't know.
But
So,
it is
but
interesting.
all those little things.
It's interesting. So a lot of like Vancouver used to be so strict on trees, for example. It's this is the city, the hardest city to get anything built in, and it comes from municipal regulation. And my theory, but I'm not an expert at this at all, is like I really do think that governments have really obfuscated their responsibility on infrastructure. And I
Mhm.
would much rather see a lot more money going into infrastructure spending so that the cities don't feel the need to then tax the people so much on development fees and stuff to pay for the infrastructure. And it's
Yeah,
really this vicious cycle where most development that's happening in Lower Mainland is all the infrastructure is being paid for by the developers through the
yeah,
TCL fees.
100%.
And that's supposed to be a government responsibility. It's not supposed to be development responsibility to deal with it. So I do think there's some we should be looking at it a lot more differently of how the government can be responsible, but it's not going to be these one size fits all plans. Like what happens if there's a tree in the middle of your lot and you want to save the tree? You can't, like your lot's done.
Yeah, exactly. No, 100%.
But,
So switching gears to CA,
mhm.
that's kind of what this podcast is about. What are you finding today's big challenges out there? Like again, like even the developers facing all that cost, like in the end, you guys are getting squeezed down to the point where there's no much, they don't want to spend money in CA, but the thing is you're obligated to do it.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm still quite young in my career as well, so I can only go off of what I've been experienced. And for most architects, all we really care about is mitigating liability and getting sued. That's what I think about
Yeah.
every time I'm on site. Um,
Yep.
but I can only really tell you like one ways that we've been trying to prevent issues, and like that's communication again. And how we do things a little differently is bringing the contractor in at the very beginning. So as soon as I sign a
Okay.
client,
Yep.
I give the client options to choose a contractor immediately. And
Nice.
in CA, the biggest problem that comes up is normally just as things missed, things not seen, and there's a lot of pressure on architects to know everything, catch everything, but we're all human and we should just accept the fact
Hmm.
that you're going to miss things. We all miss things, and the
Yep.
more eyes that are on a project at the early design stage will prevent CA from being a nightmare.
That's right.
And that's just the easiest thing to do. So I find one, having open communication. ChatGPT can use to have open communication between all parties. And the one thing that we do here that is a little different is all our drawings are for contractors first.
Hmm.
I don't,
Right.
our drawings are not for us. And I feel many architects get very obsessed with their drawings, like it represents their own personal identity. But drawings are supposed to be for
Yeah.
contractors. And we always say here, like, can the most simplest person understand this? Can Granny
Yeah.
understand this drawing kind of thing? And how can we make the drawing more clear? And
Hmm.
that's always our strategy here is to make the details clear, not the way that things were have been done. And
Right. Yeah.
there's just so many firms I've seen a lot of drawings. I've worked for contractors before I started this business, doing a lot of side work for contractors, doing their shop drawings, reviewing a lot of architects' work. And if I'm asking questions and I'm supposed to be trained in this, like, then how the hell is a contractor supposed to do it?
Right. Oh, exactly. And it's all perspective too. Like you see it one way and then
Yeah.
they look at a different, fresh perspective. But I like how you said, like bringing them in early on. And I guess that's where a design build process can go. But there was a neat thing that came up at the CSI National in Houston
Hmm.
last month for me. And they're joking of this was a spec software, right?
Hmm.
And they had stickers that said no R5s, and I chuckled. I'm like, that's not a reality. But the way they're like, well, this is how they were doing it. They were kind of doing a similar approach working with you, um, you as the architect working with the builder,
Hmm.
and they had their specs in this online platform where they had their subs coming into it and starting to ask the RFIs during that design
Yeah,
stage.
yeah, yeah.
Well, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by this? And then they started making all those changes. And then when it was like, okay, this is perfect, we're good, we're ready to get going and building this, they already vetted out
Exactly.
the drawings, they
Yeah,
vetted out the specs,
yeah,
and there wasn't any confusion. And
yeah.
it was kind of, that's a neat approach.
And it's good to I'm very like blessing and curse, but I'm very honest with clients, a little too much sometimes, where it is allowing a contractor in to and like letting them all know the process.
Hmm.
And from a business owner, like the best thing of being an owner is I finally understand how an owner feels. And for decision makers, all we really want to know is the spectrum of what's the worst case scenario, what's the best case, and then you will always just end up in the middle somewhere. But I always overemphasize the negative of what could go wrong, so it's in their mind already. So having a contractor at the very beginning, it starts identifying all the problems early before we even get to pricing, and that's
Yes.
why CA is a lot about mitigating cost differences, and
Yep.
that's where the lawsuits occur. So if you bring all the eyeballs at the beginning, there's no excuses for the contractor to miss anything or anything like that. Even if we're doing a traditional bidding process, I still ask the client if they want to bring a contractor in as a pre-construction agreement,
Okay.
because they're just still contractors, and I know I might get shit on this, but the um, contractors are the building experts, not architects. Because
Right.
they're the construction experts. Sorry, construction experts. They know the
Yes.
trades. They know how it gets constructed. They roll their eyes at us all the time, and it's because we spend far too much time in an office. We're not on site, and
Yeah.
all those details you draw all day, you can be drawing it, but do you even know what you're drawing? And
Yeah.
I saw we had a contractor doing residing on a project, and for the first time I was on site to actually see bug screen, because we always show it as a
Right.
block, like it's a solid
Yes.
block on our drawings, but it's not that
Yeah.
at all in person. It's a piece of fabric that sits at the bottom,
Yeah.
and it's interesting to see it in person because you're like, oh, it looks nothing like the detail.
Well, exactly. And like I've done a ton of home renos myself. So like, yeah, my last house and everything, like I revitized it,
Yeah.
I drew all the millwork, and it was good even too. You're like, oh, how am I going to turn the crown molding into this,
Hmm.
non piece of mill? I know you went through it. So, anyways, you did all the drawings. You're like, these are awesome drawings. You print it out,
Yeah.
you get it there to the table saw, and you're like, where's that dimension?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
run back to the computer, like, oh yeah, it's this, and then you do it, and then you're like, how am I putting this together? Like, it's definitely, you're right. It's one thing to look at
Hmm.
and draw the detail, but when you physically get there, like same thing, like take a typical window detail,
Yeah.
right? You're like the 10 processes from peel and stick and
Yeah. Yeah.
Tyvek
Yeah.
and everything. You draw all these things, you see it every single day. But if you go to anyone, even yourself, and just go, all right, go frame the window.
Yeah.
Oh, I can frame it. Okay, good. How do you do the peel and stick?
Yeah.
So it's an art, it's a craft, and that's, we're definitely losing trades, every year as we keep progressing, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. But
Like,
yeah, qualities matter, and you're like you said, working with them key
yeah.
is
Well, we
huge.
used to, people have to really remember like what was the relationship like, and it used, if I always went to cathedrals kind of times, and it was the master builder, a stonemason, and the architect. Those were the
Mhm.
two people building the cathedral, and if they weren't together, then nothing gets done. And it is that
Right.
relationship of the master mason and the architect together. And it's no different from today. I don't know why architects all of a sudden there's so much animosity between contractors and architects these days. And my whole goal when I started this firm was to heal that and bring the contractors in and remove all the ego. Because I know nothing at the end of the day. Like, to build the skyscraper behind me, like there's so much to know. And someone from LinkedIn put it a good way, which architects were supposed to know an ocean wide and an inch deep about
Right.
construction. And I often compare us to conductors, where like you need to know how every instrument works, but you can't play every
Mhm.
instrument. It's the same thing, and it's just having the humility to talk to contractors. They know what they're doing a lot of the time. There is some bad ones out there, but over the career you start finding the ones that know what they're doing, and everyone's just stop being so scared of liability all the time. Because if the communication's open, there's not going to
Yeah.
be a problem later. And like that's what I really really discovered, and it's just coming down to psychology and human behavior. We all just want clarity and we all want certainty, but it requires conversation early,
I love it.
specifically in
Yeah,
CA.
well said, well said. And, like, looking back to, like, when you I did a lot of schoolwork, right?
Mhm,
And when we kind of drafted up the old, like, we're doing, like, a renovation to, like, Langley Secondary or something like that. Well, it was, like, 12 drawings
mhm.
or whatever, like, 20 drawings, and yet everything that we draw today is, like, almost 150
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pages,
And
right? And it's,
we
like,
put our
covering everything.
we put our little disclaimer on the front for contractors, confirm everything. And
Exactly.
like
Yeah,
they're
do not scale these drawings and
yeah, yeah,
everything,
yeah. But they're gonna miss
but
it. We have to just realize that architects come from white collar, privileged background, and it's usually blue collar trades on site, and there has to be a coming together of the two, and there can't be this elitist mindset
yeah,
anymore. And that might just
exactly.
because I'm from a military family, but I do find I learned so much more from contractors than I've ever learned from another architect. Um, and
100%. There's
yeah,
ones, yeah.
that's why,
That
and
makes
that's
sense,
also why I love
absolutely. Yep.
heritage buildings as well, because there's a lot of lost knowledge in heritage work.
Mhm.
And actually listening to the trades actually have to work with. I'm relearning a lot of the techniques that were from the past. I find absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, there is a craft, like you said, that
Yeah.
that is where the attention to detail really does matter, right?
Hmm.
How do you tie into this? How do you maintain that history there? And then that, but this is where, you've been so humble to the contractor, but this is where you come in as the
Yeah,
architect
yeah,
and say, this is good, but I really want to maintain it and do these attention to details. And like you said, between that synergy and that communication, that's where I get all
yeah.
jazzed up and real excited, because that's where the project becomes the beautiful thing that it
And
is,
we can't
and the team environment.
Yeah, and we can't forget about the client in the triangle as well. So,
Yes, they're there too.
yeah, because like we have to realize the power that we have as architects is that we could completely derail, and many do derail projects by being so hard on the trades and stuff, or like redo this because it doesn't meet my standards. But
Yeah,
uh, as long as the communication is also open with the client. And I have a very firm rule that with contractors, we always go with solutions, not problems. Um, and I do joke that architects are very much like architectural therapists because when you're spending millions of
amen.
dollars, it's the most, it's so anxiety inducing that, specifically with homeowners, I find they're anxious as hell. And my job is really to guide them through, like a doula, to birth their house. And it's a very challenging project. So as
Yeah,
CEA, it's the most anxiety is the highest. And what a lot of people kind of don't realize is like it's that last week is how they're going to remember that project forever, and how all of what you did before doesn't really matter. It's that last week of how easy was the transition for them to actually like close the project off and everything. But I find that's the hardest part is that last little stint.
yeah. No, absolutely. So here's the question: if someone needs therapy, or they want to just hire you to because you're an awesome architect, where do they find you? Where can they connect with you?
Longprearchitecture.ca is our website. You can reach us out on there. I have a constantly always posted on LinkedIn, as you said. I think you can just find me, David Longpre. I don't know my handle. It's Longpre Architecture as well. It's pretty simple. And then yeah, maybe future podcasts with Matt here or other places. But if you
Absolutely.
but we do specialize in a lot of multiplex. I'm getting my heritage certificate coming up. So I'm always if I'm always interested in exploring these two type of typologies in Vancouver.
Yeah. No, so cool. Well, no, thank you for being so part of it. Yeah, so we can get this one in person, but hey, there's a ton of 2025 events coming
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
One of them's being BuildX. We will have to celebrate our 1 year anniversary
No
anyway. So
Valentine's Day again.
Valentine's Day, I think it's appropriate, but
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
but absolutely. No, thank you. I
No, thank you for
really
having me.
appreciate it. And I hope yeah. And then of course, last, but not least, David, architects, keep designing, and those contractors keep making those plans reality. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Good.